Welcome to Mojo Talks, where we explore the world through stories. I'm Mayur Channagere, visual storyteller and your host. Welcome to Mojo Talks with Mayur, and today we have KVK Murthy, who's an ex-banker, historian, avid traveler, reader, published author, a man who wears many hats. And Murthy Garu, welcome to our podcast. I'm so happy that you're here today.
Thank you.
So, how are you feeling?
Excellent. Wonderful, comfortable.
Awesome. So, Murthy Garu, I just want to, just to set the context. Let's start with your early years. You're growing up, where did you grow up, your career?
Actually, I was born, I come from a Telugu family, obviously. Telugu, very traditional Orthodox Telugu Brahmin family. My grandfather, my paternal grandfather was from Calcutta, which is coastal Andhra. And my mother's father, that's my maternal grandfather, he's from Produttur, Kadapa district here, Rayalaseema. So I was born in Produttur. It was not very far from Bangalore, apparently. But then my father was a central government servant. He was in civil aviation. So he had, obviously it was a transferable job. You go from one airport to another. So we traveled all over. My childhood was spent all over India, in fact. The bulk of it was, 6 years in Ahmedabad, then 1 year in Jabalpur, where I finished school. And then, of course, we moved on to Allahabad, where my siblings, my sister and my brother, they finished their school there. And then I went off to college. I went off to BITS Pilani, my college. And that was it. And then after college, I joined SBI, took an exam.
When you joined SBI is where the job made you travel to Calcutta, where you spent most of the time.
I was posted in Calcutta. Most of my batch, in fact, our batch was a very small batch at that time. About 101 people in that batch, all over India. So half of that batch was posted to Bengal. I was one of those. The rest of us was scattered. But then I was very happy that I was posted in Bengal for two reasons. Because one, I loved Calcutta, although I had never seen Calcutta. Because after seeing it, it was love at first sight. That was a different story. But then my love for Calcutta was a very funny thing, because Calcutta, I always believed, was a kind of a bad mirror image of London, you see. It has, even today, it's got portions of it which remind you a lot of London. And of course, the British built it that way.
Correct.
So, Calcutta is considered to be the bastard child of London. See? So,
there's a lot of historical significance also to Calcutta, right?
So,
during the British Empire.
When I posted there. I was there, in fact, 10 years. Not in Calcutta itself. Initial posting was to a rural district headquarters in Bengal, in rural Bengal. Not very far from Shantiniketan, by the way. So my boss and I, we used to, twice we went by motor, on his motor. He used to have a Java motor like those days. So I don't know, one of those, yes. So I was still new in Bengal. I was a kid, I was just 23. I didn't know a word of Bengali. And the only thing is one had heard of Shantiniketan, obviously. So my boss, he took me on his motorbike, pillion.
Pillion.
Riding pillion. So Shantiniketan.
What was it that, not knowing anything about Calcutta, or, not knowing, I would say not having visited Calcutta, what was the first thing that kind of drew you to it? You said you fell in love over a period of time.
Yeah, initially because, I used to see pictures of Calcutta and all that, but then the actual, like I said, love at first sight, this is really worth talking about, because I've told people about this. When we had, immediately after I joined the bank, we have a staff college in Hyderabad. So we have a 10-day orientation course there. After that, we had a 1-month additional training in Bombay. That was a training center, smaller thing. So after that, we were supposed to go off to our respective postings. So I had 2 other batchmates with me in Bombay. So the 3 of us were traveling by the Bombay-Howrah mail or one of those things. Out of the 3 of us, one of us was familiar with Calcutta because he was Assamese. So he was from Assam, so he knew Calcutta quite well. The other 2 were innocents, me and another chap, he was from Kerala. So we landed in Howrah station in the evening, maybe in November, winter, it was quite cold. And we took a cab, we were going into the city, we checked into a hotel because we didn't have a place to stay. We were crossing Howrah Bridge, across the river, and in that winter, like the fog, the lights in the river, the river boats, and the warehouses along the banks of the river, on both sides of the banks of the river, and the lights reflected in the water. The entire thing was exactly like London. It was exactly like, particularly, I mentioned this in one of my writing, there's this, nobody reads them nowadays, unless you're a connoisseur. There was this famous detective writer named Edgar Wallace. So Edgar Wallace describes London, essentially from there. So I was reminded of Edgar Wallace's London, and I crossed that Howrah Bridge, crossing the river. And that was the moment I said, this is love at first sight, total. Smitten for life.
Interesting you should mention a book that you read.
In fact, many books, because he talks to me. He's a detective writer. There's so many, lots of his detective novels. See, they're all, London-based, Scotland Yard and all that. So, and particularly the river. The river is very much, a part of Calcutta, just as the Thames is a part of London. You can't have London without the Thames. You can't have Calcutta without the Hooghly,
Correct.
So, and that's probably why the English was so, they built it almost exactly in the image of their home, So it's just like that, you have the dockside cranes, and you have those warehouses. All the rest of it.
Yeah, as
very
you describe
very
it,
evocative.
as you describe, I'm trying to visualize it, and that's what reading does to you, isn't it?
Yeah.
You visualize, you read a perspective of the writer, but then the entire visualization is your own creativity, which unfortunately today we are missing out, given the bombardment of whatever social media.
Because you can't use your imagination anymore. You don't need imagination. You just have to look at it's there in your phone.
And it's
what do you think about? How do you think?
And it's someone else's visualization or creativity.
Exactly.
It's not yours.
Precisely, that's it.
And have you always been an avid reader from?
Always. Right from my childhood. My God, that's one thing that I regret in many ways, because I never played games. Even in school, my PTE teachers and all, they said, look, this fellow doesn't play. He's supposed to draw me out and take me out to the play field. I sit in a corner, read. Even at home, I used to be very silent. Even among my siblings at home, among my parents, I was not very communicative. I was never very communicative. I never used to talk.
So reading was yours.
That was my world.
That's your world.
Made. In a way, I said, can be a disadvantage, because if you shut yourself up like that, you're not prepared for the harsh world outside. You're at a disadvantage.
But there is a sense of peace, right? When you're reading and it's your own world, you're in your own creative thing.
Definitely.
How much has I'm sure all your travel, your life, everything has been based on, influenced by the books, isn't it?
Predominantly, yes. And particularly, I would say the English language. The English language. Everything that goes with it.
So, did you read only English or any other languages?
Only English. Because when we were children, obviously my grandmother taught us Telugu. We learned Telugu. Then in school we learned Hindi. And I did a bit of school French, and again, St. Xavier's in Ahmedabad. So 4 years of school French I had, but that's about it. And after that, the only other language I read, and this is many years later, like I said, when I went to Calcutta, I started reading Bengali. So now I read Bangla. I can read Bengali. So,
And I mean, I'm assuming that Tagore was one of the first books that you picked
yes.
up. What was it about Tagore's writing that kind of?
I'm not a Tagore expert. I mean, let's be very, very clear about this. I mean, I'm not going anywhere near that because I came to Tagore quite late. Because initially, even during my Calcutta years, I was very, I was lukewarm to Tagore. But I came to him particularly only through his music. And that came many, many years later. That's about 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, in 2007, 2008. And I wanted to check out what was happening on the Rabindranath Tagore scene. And I discovered some new singers, and through them, it's like taking a shot of LSD.
And it's an acquired taste, isn't it? Rabindranath Sangeet is an acquired taste.
It is an acquired taste. It is an acquired taste because normal, like I said, I mean, it's like a Westerner. You take somebody who's a complete Westerner, who's used to the Western forms of music, and you ask him to listen to M.S. Subbulakshmi.
He will not.
There's a complete...
two different genres. And I mean, notes-wise...
Yes, almost like that.
It's two different worlds.
It is an acquired taste and it's different. It's different from most of the forms of music. But the greatness of the man is that he composed his music, he wrote the lyrics, I mean, poetry, it's sheer poetry. In fact, the most sacred book in Bengal, more sacred than any scripture, is this book called Gita Bitan. Gita Bitan is, the compendium of Tagore's songs, his poetry and his song. His poetry, of course, there's another one called Sanchayita, which is a collection of poetry. But particularly Gita Bitan. No house will be complete, no Bengali house will be complete without a Gita Bitan, and it's usually kept in a place of great reverence. I mean,
like we keep a Gita or a Bible or...
So Gita Bitan is, it has that. And rightly so, because it's difficult to describe.
The emotion there. So, picking up from there, your reading and this thing, how much, you are a published writer, you just published a book.
Published means only that volume of poetry which came about by sheer accident. Otherwise, I was not a published writer, in the sense, I had my poems published, scattered in various places, and a few articles published here and there. But apart from that, I didn't have a book to my name. That is the thing. And I never actually actively sought that. I never didn't go looking for it. But this thing happened, this poetry volume happened, as I said, by sheer accident.
And we first met at a book reading of Ryan's book reading,
yes.
Right? That's where we met and
Exactly.
we got into conversation,
Yes.
then we connected on Facebook.
Precisely.
And I think that is where that's where I at least read most of your writings.
On Facebook,
Because even the simplest thing of walking down the road and having idli, you would make it so romantic and poetic. And that's, for me, the first impressions of Murthy Garu was that, how can the person, even a simple drinking chai on the roadside, can be so romantic? And was it Sumana who...
Yeah, it was Sumana Roy who wrote an article about me. A small little piece about me on her page. I had met her. She's, of course, a celebrity. She's a very big celebrity. Poet. She's a professor in Ashoka University. So I met her briefly when she came here for a poetry conference or something. This was way back in, 2017. We just met very briefly. So I think, referring to that, I think the fourth anniversary or the third anniversary of that meeting, she remembered me and she wrote this article, this little piece about me, saying that this chap who lives in Bangalore and so on and so forth. Now that article garnered a whole lot of attention. Lots of people, and I was flooded with these friend requests. I mean, for someone like me who would get one friend request maybe once a year or once in 2 years, two, like that. Suddenly my friend request things went up, there was something like 160, 170 friends requests. I said, what the hell is this? I mean, this is...
But that shows that so many people were able to relate to your writing, isn't it?
No, they viewed me as some kind of a curiosity or a nut or something, who's this chap? But then there's this publisher in Delhi, Sarabjit Garcha. He runs this publishing house called Copper Coin. Now, I wasn't aware of this. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know this thing. He sent me a message saying that he had read someone's piece on me, and he said he would like to publish my work. Now, when that offer came, I was scared. My first reaction was fear. I am always frightened of these things. When someone approaches, my God, what is this? Because, it's like you're afraid of losing your privacy, your space, and although, I don't know, the fundamental thing was fear. So I immediately messaged someone, and I said, look, there's this guy who says that he wants to publish me. What do you... And no, he had referred her name. So I said, he has made a reference to you. So, do I say yes or no? We speak in Bengali. So she said, no, he's a good chap, so you go along.
Go along.
I accepted. And that's how it happened. I accepted. Even then it took 2 years. And this happened in 2020. Then finally the book came out in 2022 because of COVID and all that. Poor chap, because even he, the publisher, I think he lost some people on his team because of COVID. So, got delayed. But that's it. As I said, it was an accident. Publishing was an accident.
And what was the idea behind the title? A remote...
That's... it's actually a phrase from one of my lines in one of my poems.
Oh, okay.
But that refers to a famous 16th century poet named Andrew Marvell, metaphysical. He was a British, English metaphysical poet, Andrew Marvell. So I had written a poem as a tribute to Andrew Marvell.
Okay.
And I was referring to Andrew Marvell's poetry, his own poetry, as a remote austere speech, you see. And thereby, my own thing was, I refer to it also as a remote austere speech because, my poetry is slightly different from most of, at least I don't know, I don't write poetry about beggars and I don't write poetry about somebody,
Yeah, but that also shows that there are people out there who enjoy good writing. Need not, be of the dark side or the over-romanticized part of it and this thing.
Yes, but I don't know, considering my own tastes, my own reading tastes, my own writing styles, many would call me a reactionary. Even I call myself a reactionary. I probably belong to an age which was pre-postmodern. See, the present day is postmodern, this is pre-postmodern. So I don't, there is a disconnect, you might say.
And even your pseudonym on
James Joyce.
James Joyce.
That was a joke actually because fine. He is my literary god. It goes back to my college days when I first discovered him. Oh my God, this chap is. And so when Facebook came up and all that, for some reason I wasn't very fond of my own name. So just for a lark, I stole the name. I just stole it. So then thing is, other people also steal names, but then I was thinking to myself, like the famous line, they say, agar haath marna hai to bada haath maro. See? So, I was still a big name. The biggest of them all.
Biggest of them all.
Yeah, James Joyce.
True. So I also know you as an book collector, and I've been to your house, and it's every book collector reader's dream when you walk into your house with stacks of books.
Yeah.
And you have collected some rare gems. Especially, you're a walking, talking encyclopedia. That's how I like to introduce you as when it comes to Central Asia, right? So, when did your fascination with Central Asia start?
Actually, two books. The first was a book by Neville Maxwell, who's unfortunately, or fortunately, I won't say, he wrote a book about the India-China War in 1962. The war which we lost. Okay, the book is called India's-China War. Neville Maxwell, and the book was very unpopular in India because obviously it criticized India, it criticized Nehru, the way the whole thing was handled. Apart from the war part of it, there's one. The book begins with the history of India's border problems, and this was about the British attempts at defining borders for India, British India. Obviously, and it's a very fascinating essay because of the historical background and the history of these areas, this particular terrain. The terrain itself was extremely interesting because most of it's all inhospitable. You have high mountains, mountain passes, huge, the Tibetan plateau, you have the Central Asian plateau, all those, the deserts in it. There was that part of it. There was something very, intriguing about that. The second book was, and this was in fact the defining one, which came about in 1977. I read it in Calcutta, borrowed it from the British Library, the British Council Library. And this is by John Kay. It's a book called When Men and Mountains Meet. And this book was the defining moment. After this I was smitten because this book is completely about Central Asia, the great game, all that. But after that, it became a passion. It certainly became a passion. It became an obsession. And it became an obsession, largely a bibliophilic obsession, because it was confined only to hunting for books on Central Asia. And those days you didn't have internet, you didn't have Amazon, none of these things. You had only bookshops, and that too, you had to look for these books are all out of print. Most of these books are all out of print because they're classic books. They're ancient books. So you had to look for them in second-hand bookshops if there were any, and you had to look for them on pavements, and that's how, single-mindedly as to go looking for. You didn't know what you were looking for, but you knew it when you found it. So that's how my library slowly, sort of started growing, ting, 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 little by little by little by little.
One book at a time.
One book at a time, that's how. And it was primarily a bibliophilic obsession, and till 2014, the entire, the territory of the Great Game, where the Great Game was played. Great Game is, of course, this Cold War, 19th century Cold War between Britain and Russia for control of Central Asia. Because for Britain, India was a jewel in the crown. And Britain was always afraid that Russia would come from the north and invade India and so on and so forth. So this was the Great Game, And the arena on which this game was played, if you can call it a game, was Central Asia. What is present-day Russian, all the stans that you have in Kazakh, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan in Russia, and Xinjiang in China. So this was the arena of the Great Game. So till 2014, this territory was only here, and in my library. Then in 2014, for the first time, my friend and I, we traveled into Central Asia. And after that, 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, 5 years, we completely covered Central Asia. Everything, every single place that we wanted to.
And how did you map where you wanted to travel? Was there some...
It was quite easy, because for us, like we knew it back of our hand. In fact, when we were traveling in Xinjiang, we carried Orel Stein's map with us. Orel Stein, a famous archaeologist, who was the one who excavated all the Buddhist sites in Central Asia, in Afghanistan and in Xinjiang.
Xinjiang.
You know, all those, I think I told you about the Buddhist monasteries and all this. You know, they were buried in the sand, under the sand, the desert, the Taklamakan desert. And they'd been there for 2,000 years and completely, perfectly preserved because absolutely dry. There's no rain, nothing. Total.
Nothing to destroy them.
Perfectly preserved, you know. Wow. So he excavated and he found all those things. So in 2015, on our first trip to Xinjiang, my friend brought Orlstein's map. It was 1903 Orlstein's map for Central Asia. So we were actually following in his footsteps. And my friend also, he's a bit of a nut there also. We discovered that the river had shifted some 30 feet from, given in the map, you know, the original map.
Wow.
It even said that it's shifted about 30 odd feet, the course of the river. You know. So that's why, till then, it was all here. Then after that, we completely papered.
So you basically went back to the books.
Yeah,
the history.
At every time, I mean, we always carried our books with us. Whenever we traveled, every single trip of ours, the book pertaining to that particular country was always with us. You know, or books sometimes. We usually books more than two. So we'd always have. We knew because fundamentally, what were we doing? We were seeing what the writer saw and how much of it still remains. You know,
that's
what he had seen.
And was it very different?
In most cases, yes and no, because some of the things remain. Like for instance, in Central Asia, if you go in Uzbekistan, the famous cities like, you know, Tashkent, Samarkand and Khiva, Samarkand, Bukhara and Khiva, these three main things. Samarkand was Timur's capital.
Correct.
It's also supposed to be a showpiece for Central Asia. I mean, all those monuments, those lovely, you know, the blue tiles, you know, the famous blue tile domes. That was Timur's speciality, and that was borrowed from Persia, by the way, Iran. In fact, Robert Byron calls it the Timur Renaissance. You know, this fantastic architectural marvels that happened in Central Asia in the 15th century, 14th and 15th century, because of Timur largely. So these things, over the years, I mean, 14th century was 600 years back, over the years, because of earthquakes, because of storms and stuff, the desert, most of these monuments were crumbling. As recently as 19th century, early 20th century, most of these monuments were crumbling. I mean, the tiles were falling off, the roofs were falling. Okay. The Russians, to their credit, it must be said, the Soviet Russians, they restored all these monuments. And the preservation of the monuments and subsequently the republics, like for instance the Republic of Uzbekistan, I mean, the governments, they're taking great pains to ensure that these things are preserved. Of course, they are restoration, they're not the original monuments. Part of it is still there inside. For instance, in the Bibi Khanum, the ceiling is still, the old mud ceiling is still there, you can still see it. You know, you have pigeons roosting and all that. But the restoration, now, there are two ways of looking at restorations. The orthodox way is restorations are no. I mean, you know, it's all, you know, kind of
patchwork.
It's patchwork. Well, not only that, it's parvenu. It's kind of nourish kind of thing. You see, you can't. I mean, a ruin must look like a ruin. But to the credit of the Russians, it must be said that the restoration work is done very well, beautiful. In fact, my friend and I were talking. If Timur came back today, he'd be quite happy with what these fellows have done. You know. Because those blue mosques, those tiles, everything has been described perfectly, beautifully done.
So a lot of pain has been taken to do the research and get the...
And for people like me, I mean, who have a library, where I have pictures of these monuments which look like, I mean, which were originally ruins, crumbling. So I can see that, the before and the after. You know? So I have pictures, photographs showing, you know, the Registan Square and the Bibi Khanum and the Gurami, I mean, that is the grave of Timur, crumbling, and the same places today, you know.
Wow. Okay. And so this is from your first trip, I presume.
This is my first trip.
Consecutive trips. So any other adventures? Like, you know, earlier you were mentioning about the border crossing.
Yeah, that happened in, when was it? I think 2017, when we crossed from Kyrgyzstan into China. So our second visit to Xinjiang. But I mean, it's a fairly smooth crossing. Because normally land crossings, we are always a little dicey. I mean, an airport is fine because you show your passport, okay, visa is there, sends you. Maybe he'll ask you a couple of questions, send you off. Because he doesn't have time for you. I mean,
with the queues and.
But a border crossing, I mean, a land crossing is different because the land guy, I mean, everything depends on that fellow's whim. You may have a very valid visa, but if that fellow doesn't like your face, I mean, he might say, sorry, you can't enter, and there's nothing you can do about it. We were lucky. And we were scared because there was 2017 was when this Doklam incident happened, in the border.
Borders.
The border clash between the Indian Army and the PLA. So my friend and I were thinking, these fellows remember Doklam, and this is these two Indians out here, they decide to
send you back.
Yeah. So, but fortunately, it didn't happen.
As an Indian traveling here, what was the experience? I mean, initially, I'm sure you had a lot of apprehensions, or were the people accepting, and how was it?
People are wonderful. I mean, they love Indians. I mean, I don't know for what reason, but they love Indians. The moment you say you're from India, and all doors open. See, absolutely, and particularly in Russian Central Asia, that is the stans. They still hark back, especially the older generation. They hark back to, the time of Raj Kapoor's visit to Moscow. I mean, to Russia.
Correct.
And all of them, they sing these old Raj Kapoor songs. Those old ladies, even now, they're in love with Raj Kapoor. They talk about Raj Kapoor and Nargis and all these people, and they keep singing those old Avara songs.
Avara and all
Yes.
that.
And Bollywood is very much alive and kicking in all of Central Asia, not just Uzbekistan, everywhere. You go even to Xinjiang, China. I mean, Chinese Central Asia, Xinjiang. You have these, these chaikhanas, these eateries, what we call dhabas. They have Bollywood videos playing on their TV. Yeah, songs.
So Bollywood is somewhere become part of the cultural exchange.
Cultural ambassador.
Cultural ambassador.
Yeah, now they talk about Shah Rukh Khan, they talk about Amir Khan, Aishwarya Rai. These names, it's like a litany, it's like a mantra, they keep rattling out these names.
The names. You also, so you, as part of your travel, did you anywhere feel that they feel guilty of what happened to Shastriji?
Oh yeah, that is there. In Uzbekistan, yes, in Tashkent. They feel that, and they're not, especially when you talk to some of those people, the older ones, the younger ones, they don't remember it, because this happened in 1966. And particularly apart from the Uzbeks themselves, the older Russians, they haven't forgotten it. And they, it's a very ambivalent kind of thing. They don't know how to react to it, but the fundamental feeling is one of, this shouldn't have happened to a guest on our soil. He was an honored guest. The head of a government, a foreign government, dying on our soil. This is not acceptable. And at the time, even at the time, obviously the Russian government also reacted. I'm sure they took their steps. The KGB and all those guys they knew.
I'm sure, even...
Obviously, you can't... the Prime Minister of a country is staying in a dacha and suddenly he pops dead.
No, but even back then, the Russians did try to do the investigation, and of course...
They did their own. But,
everything was swept under the carpet.
I won't go into that. That's a different
story for a different time. I think the last, you were also talking about the sea, which
there are
sea. Yeah,
that is something. Because our first Uzbek trip, we had missed out the Aral Sea because Aral Sea is extreme northern Uzbekistan. It was not part of our itinerary. So part of our itinerary was, what we added was the Fergana Valley, which is eastern Uzbekistan. And the Fergana Valley is the industrial part of Uzbekistan. That's where you have all the automobile factories. Incidentally, these Daewoo, this Chevrolet, they all have factories there.
Oh.
Yeah, they make these cars there. So that's the Fergana Valley, eastern Uzbekistan. And Aral Sea was left out. But Eastern Uzbekistan, there's one more thing I think I should mention. There's, it's part of the Aral Sea. How did the Aral Sea die? My parent, the received wisdom is that it was Stalin's cotton policy, which is true. 90% of it is true. I mean, he said, do away with everything, cotton. Because the two main feeders of the Aral Sea, the Amu Darya and the Sea Darya, the Oxus and the Oxus River, that is the Amu Darya, and the Sea Darya, which is the Jaksates, these two rivers, ancient rivers. These were the feeders of the Aral Sea. Now, what happened was when suddenly, cotton was king. They say cotton, everything had to be dropped in favor of cotton. They had to grow cotton. And quotas were given. Every state, every province was given a quota. Every child was given a quota. Every family was given a quota. You have to harvest so much, you have to pick so much cotton. And every day, at the end of the day, all that if you read, you see. So, the rivers, the waters of these two main feeders were diverted towards cotton. And cotton is a very thirsty crop. So that poor sea died, the Aral Sea. Now the Aral Sea at one time, even as recently as the early part of the 20th century and the mid 20th century, it was a thriving fishing community there. There's a fishing port called Moynak. We went there. And when you go to Moynak, there's a museum there. It's called the Aral Sea Museum. And they keep showing this old film taken on the Aral Sea. These fishermen, these fishing launches, these trawlers, and these huge catches. And, Mother Russia, they call Mother Russia. The Aral Sea used to feed Mother Russia. Some thousands of tons of fish used to go from the Aral Sea. Two seas. One is the Caspian, one is the Aral. Both these, And Russia's caviar production of caviar used to be fed from the Aral Sea and the Caspian, the sturgeon, the famous sturgeon, the Aral Sea sturgeon and the Caspian Sea sturgeon used to go from here. Sea dried up, died completely. So not only the ecosystem, the fish and all that, and because of cotton, they sprayed pesticides, fertilizers, they completely poisoned that area, that Aral Sea. What used to be called the Aral Darya became the Aral Kum. Kum is a desert. Can you imagine? That's what they did to the Aral Sea.
How many?
But the thing is, here, everyone says Stalin did it. Stalin, of course, was responsible. There's no two ways about it. In fact, there's a very interesting story about this. There's a chap named Faisullah Khojayev, who was the party boss. See, the Russian Communist Party boss in Bukhara. Faisullah Khojayev. At Communist Party conference in Moscow, he had the guts to tell Stalin, he said, you can't eat cotton because there was no food crops. He told Stalin, you can't eat cotton. He is known as you can't eat cotton, Faisullah Khojayev. He was shot. Faisullah Khojayev was shot in the purges.
Because he just opposed.
Yeah, because
he had the
guts to stand up and say you can't eat cotton. And the stupidity of Stalin was, there's another thing when we were, again related to how this thing, and we saw this on the first trip, not the second trip. On our visit to the Fergana Valley, there's something called the Grand Fergana Canal. And this was one of Stalin's so-called achievements. The Jaksates River, the Sea Darya, he diverted the Sea Darya and he built this huge irrigation canal. And the canal is some 230 or 240 kilometers long. All the water, only for cotton. This canal was dug by manual labor. There were no earth-moving equipment, no tractors, no JCBs, none of this, no scoops, nothing. Manual labor, mainly Tajik and some Uzbek, mainly Tajik manual labor. The canal, 230 kilometers of the canal was dug in a record time of 45 days.
What?
45 days, 1.5 months. He built this so-called Grand Canal, this Uzbek, what is this? Fergana Grand Canal. 45 days. That is tough. You either dig or you dig your grave.
Yeah.
That's it.
So basically,
you either dig the canal or you dig the grave. That's it. That's how it is. We went and saw the canal. It's so beautiful. The canal is, today You don't know how much blood
That
there
has
is
gone
that's
into
flowing
it.
in the water there, you know. It's a beautiful canal because it's like a lovely river, and you have these both sides. You have these poplars, the famous Central Asian poplar. It grows like that, tall. You know, the Central Asian poplar is a very beautiful tree. It grows, and you have this huge, long arcade of Central Asian poplars and this lovely canal in between. Marvelous. The Fergana Grand Canal. That is. So the sea died. But then the thing is, there are historical records. I mean, on my own reading, I've seen as far back as the 19th century, people were talking of the Aral Sea drying up, but not to this extent. Because even today, if you see satellite images, you see images of the Aral Sea, say 50 years ago, and today there's hardly anything there. You know? We saw that. We went and saw Moynak is a desert. There's no port. There's no water there. The little bit of water that we went and saw, just a small little sliver. Incidentally, the sea is shared between two countries. The northern part is with Kazakhstan, the southern part is with Uzbekistan. What the Kazakhs have done is they've dammed there and they're rehydrating the sea.
Okay.
They're putting water back again.
Back into it.
So that part of the sea is again coming back to life. The Uzbek side, I don't know what they're doing, but I don't think much is being
But
done.
is this where you saw all the old shipwrecks abandoned?
Yes, exactly.
And
We went and we climbed those shipwrecks. We climbed into those shipwrecks. There's it's very surreal. It's like something out of a dream landscape that you're seeing. You know, these rusted boat hulks out there, and this huge stretch of
Just barren land.
Nothing, barren land, and it's all salt. Salt and poisonous because it's got fertilizers, and I told you, all those pesticides and toxins and all kinds of things. The only thing I picked up from there, because this is something, a memento I wanted, one of in fact, the predominant plant which grows in these deserts, the Kizilkum, the Karakum and all these places, is this bush called the saksawal. It has got no leaves. It's just like a clump. It's like a bush, It's a huge thing, grows like that. Because it has no leaves because it has to conserve water, So whatever little water. So the saksawal bush. So I found one tall, long saksawal stalk on the bed of the Aral Sea. So I brought that home. I kept that. I said that was my...
That's survival, nature's way of surviving. And
saksawal is the only thing which survives. There's nothing else.
nothing else.
That sea is gone. It's an entire community was wiped out. A fishing community. There were people thriving there.
And how long ago was this?
This happened within the last 40, 50 years.
Wow.
Yes. In fact, as recently as the 70s, there was still some water left. But then by the 70s, the UN also became aware of this, And they were trying to do things and all that. Whatever happened was immediately after the breakup of the Soviet Union. To some extent, at least people got to know what was going on there. Otherwise, there was the other thing that most people don't know is because of these pesticides and these toxins and fertilizers and all that, the incidence of diseases, particularly among children, tuberculosis and cancer, all kinds of things, very high.
But there's a lesson for us, right? If this can happen in the last 30, 40 or 50 years, there's so many things that have been replicated today. Similar, promoting certain types of crops.
Probably, I don't know. I'm not an agronomist. I don't know anything about that.
There is something to be learned from history.
You can see it with your own eyes. You can actually see how a living body of water, a living organism actually.
Correct.
You actually cry. I wept when I saw that, because it was a living organism which you strangled, you murdered. Because of greed. Cotton. Of course, this cotton craze started in the 19th century because what happened was in the mid-19th century, till the mid-19th century, Russia was importing cotton from the US.
Yes, correct.
Then in 1861, the Civil War happened in the US. So cotton exports stopped. So then they had to grow their own cotton.
Find an alternative source and...
So even from Tsarist times and cotton things, but then of course Stalin, cotton quotas, became a major quota thing was a horrible thing.
The last travel was to Iran.
Iran, yeah. That was in 2000.
And this time you traveled alone.
I went alone. This time I went alone. But this again, it happened by accident. I mean, I didn't think it would happen. It was just one of those things and sort of snowballed one into the one little, just Googling something and then it, but it was a lovely trip, 18 days road trip. But here again, I was following a particular itinerary. I mean, this writer named Robert Byron, who wrote this book called The Road to Oxiana. And I would probably say it is still the finest book on Persia, with Byron, of course, I went purely following his itinerary, not his mind, because he traveled to Persia. I mean, he wanted to go into Central Asia. I mean, he was coming there, he wanted to cross the Oxus in Afghanistan and go over to Tajikistan. He was not allowed. Whereas in my case, we had already done that. We had seen the Oxus, we had seen that. So in his case, it was road to Oxiana. In my case, it was road from Oxiana. I had already done Oxiana, so I was traveling to Iran from Oxiana.
Contrary to the belief, the minute someone says Iran, you think of the war and the devastation
Very
that's
different.
happened there.
Once you go there, it's very, very different. People are very nice. Extremely hospitable, very safe, by the way. I don't know about Western tourists. I can't speak for Western tourists, but speaking for myself, the welcome was extremely warm everywhere. People were, like I said, they really love Indians. They're very fond of Indians. And I had no problems anywhere at all. My guide was very good. I had two guides, one in Tehran and another one for the rest of the trip. But it was an extraordinary experience. Like I said, I carried Robert Byron's book with me. So at every place that I stopped him and every place that I was covering, I was again reading his book, seeing what he says. And finally, I managed to track down the hotel where he stayed in a place called Kazvin. There again, there was a bit of a confusion because in his book, he datelines it as a place called Zanjan. We had stopped at Zanjan for the overnight halt, and in Zanjan there was this grand hotel, but it's a new structure. So we went in there and asked at the reception whether there was an older grand there on which they built. So that chap said, no, this is a new hotel, 15 years old, nothing before. I was a little disappointed. Then we put on my driver also, he saw that, so he could sense my guide, could sense my disappointment. He said, sir, let us go. So where is it? For sure. The next stop was Kazvin, about 3 hours away from Zanjan. So we reached in the afternoon and bloody hot. Before that, we had gone to this place called Sultania. Sultania is a very famous place. Sultania is the mausoleum of the last Mongol king of Persia, Uljaytu's tomb. That's between Zanjan and Kazvin. So that was another thing which I wanted to see, Sultania, the Dome of Sultania. At the Dome of Sultania, something happened because when I was taking a picture, I dropped a certain microfiber cloth which I use for shielding my phone screen. That fell off somewhere, and I discovered the loss only after we had gone quite some distance. I was very angry, because I'm an obsessive compulsive. I'm one of those extremely kit types. Very angry. And I was angry with myself when I was. So my guide, he was the driver, he was driving, so he knew that my temper was bad. So we reached Kazvin in the afternoon around 2 o'clock or something. And I didn't feel like eating also. Besides the vegetarian, that's the other thing. For a vegetarian, you have problems. Checked into the hotel, the air conditioning was not working. So that I almost blew my top. So I told the guide, I said, you take off. Come and pick me up in the evening. So he went off somewhere, God knows where. Then I complained to the hotel guys. I think they came and did something. I don't know, probably they fixed it. So I had a shower, then I slept. Woke up in the evening. Went out for a walk. I mean, the guide came, picked me up, went out. We had dinner somewhere. I don't remember where. We had dinner, something, whatever I could eat. And we were walking down. My temper was still bad. We were walking down, it was dark. And usually when I walk, I walk with my head down. The guide was walking next to me. And suddenly, it was dark, it was around 7:30, 7:45-ish. Suddenly the chap says, Mr. Kumar, look. Mr. Kumar, he called me because he's from my, Vijay Kumar. So he called Mr. Kumar. He said, Mr. Kumar, look. He was pointing up into the dark, into the sky. I looked into the sky, to the dark sky. What? He said, look. I said, what? He said, Grand Hotel. And this was in Kazvin. And there was this ruin, this very old hotel. Very old building. Boarded up, hammered, boarded up and all that. Complete ruin. My guide, he apparently saw the signboard. Fortunately, he had his eyes up instead of looking down like me. He saw the signboard, and the signboard is in Persian. And it was a signboard put up by the Iranian government saying that this is a historic hotel, the Grand Hotel, where many important things in many important places, many important things happened and many important people lived here. And anyone who wanted to renovate it or restore it, the government would help. That was the advertisement.
Wow.
That signboard, which the Iranian government has put. So that was the thing. And it was. I said, my God, this is where Robert Byron stayed. So I mentally cursed this chap. I said, look, your datelining is bad. You should have said, you should have said Kazvin instead of Zanjan. But you can't blame him. I don't know, maybe he forgot, God knows what. Anyway,
so there was a deviation.
Yes.
From...
So it was not Zanjan, it was Kazvin, the Grand Hotel. And apparently that was the hotel in which, I subsequently read up, that was the hotel in which the coup was plotted in the original Khaja dynasty. That was overthrown by the Pahlavi dynasty, that is the last Shah. So the coup for that was plotted in that hotel.
Wow.
The Grand Hotel. Apparently that's where it happened.
So on the question of Shah, I'm sure you would have interacted with a lot of locals.
Yeah, of course. They're all of them, the popular sentiment, the common folk, the popular sentiment is against the present dispensation. They hate the present dispensation, they dislike it. They're waiting for the Shah to come back.
Wow.
They want the Shah to come back. The present Shah is the son of the old Shah.
But they still want...
This present Shah, the son and his mother, they live in the US, I think in New York or someplace, they're in exile. But they're waiting for them to come back. All the people I've spoken to, not just my guide, the shopkeepers in places like Isfahan, the bazaars and all that, they hate the present dispensation, they're waiting to get rid of them. They want the
Shah to come back. And also, there is this whole, like earlier we were talking, right, that we have this Western view of Iran. But that's
that's very different. That's one of the first things that my guide, all the people, my shopkeepers, they said, sir, don't read New York Times, don't read Washington Post, don't listen to BBC. They're all lies. If you want to see Iran, if you want to know what is Iran, come here, see for yourself. And they were right. It's a very different country. It's not, there are, like I said, in Tehran, there are women driving on the streets. They wear the finest designer vehicles.
Wears.
They wear the finest, designer shades.
And they're driving the expensive cars.
All of them. And they're all in Mercs and, BMWs and what have you.
So we don't see that side at all in the...
They're not, of course, they have to wear the chador.
They follow the...
But they don't wear the hijab. They don't cover themselves. So they just wear that's
the
all.
Scarf and...
The women.
Central Asia is known for,
Fantastic. It's a very different Iran from what you... Maybe the government or maybe the theocratic dispensation may be, fanatical or whatever. But it does not percolate, it hasn't. Of course, there were riots, I think, last year or year before last. Again, there was suddenly these things flared up. People got killed and all that, you know. But that just shows the popular sentiment is against these people. Popular sentiment is against the theocratic dispensation. In fact, on our way from Kazvin, we were going back from Kazvin further to Yazd and all that. There's a place, very famous place called Qom, Qom, Qom.
Qom.
And Qom is a very important religious center. It's an extremely important religious center in Iran. Next to Mashhad only. Mashhad was my first stop, where Imam Raza is buried. Qom is where Imam Raza's sister is buried. Imam Raza is he's the eighth Imam.
Eighth Imam.
Of the Shia thing, you know. So Imam Raza is in Mashhad. Qom, this I forget, Masuma Fatima, that's her name. Masuma Fatima, his sister, she's buried. My guide said, there's no need, we'll drive off. I said, let's see Qom. He said, what is there to see? Mullahs, city of mullahs.
So he just...
I said, no, we'll stop. So we stopped for half an hour, 40 minutes. Went and visited the shrine of Masuma Fatima. And then, of course, very hot, a huge courtyard. I mean, all those things. You know? And the sun beating down, there's no shade.
Shades. Yeah.
Although the paving and all that is marble. But even then, you know,
You can feel the heat and...
So 40 minutes we spent in Qom. So that's what, coming to the point is, the popular sentiment is against all these people. They don't want these...
the current regime
at all.
And you were also talking about the Parsi...
That is in Yazd. Yazd, I mean, after Kazvin, Kashan, and from Kashan to Yazd. Now, Yazd is a very important Zoroastrian center. It's a very old city, 2,500-year-old city, and it's a UNESCO heritage site. The 2,000-year-old city, those streets are still there.
Wow.
And it's a UNESCO heritage site, you know, beautiful, it's fantastic. So it's a very important Zoroastrian center. And my guide was from there. That was his hometown.
Okay.
So this chap, I mean, what he did was he apparently called up his wife. You know, I wasn't aware of this. So first he invited me home. So I said, look, I'm sorry, I'm not coming home. I mean, I'm a little shy, you know, I don't visit people's homes and all that. I feel embarrassed. Stay out. He had called up his wife after I checked into the hotel. You know, beautiful. And this hotel itself, two places where I stayed, these hotels, they are palaces of the governors or something, the local governors or something, which have been converted into hotels. Fabulous, you know, lovely. You've got fruit trees, orchards, fountains, you name it. Anyway, after checking into the hotel, he brought lunch for me from his wife. He had told his wife that I was a vegetarian, that I didn't eat meat. So that poor woman, she cooked for me, you know, she cooked rice and she made some beans and some sabzi, I don't remember what. But I was so touched by that, you know, that this man, he took so much trouble, you know, for his guest. So he brought the food for me. He sat with me while I ate in the hotel and all that, you know. I mean, absolutely.
See, I mean, you're actually the second person who's giving this very similar reference. You know, earlier I was talking to another friend a couple of years back, Anita. So she and a friend of hers, two vegans, traveled all the way from London to Mongolia in a Nissan Micra.
Wow.
Okay. And she gave a similar example where they were in one particular city. And the minute an absolute stranger, they had some car problems, helped them out to fix it. He was a mechanic, he fixed the car. And the minute he got to know that they're vegans and getting vegetarian food or vegan food for that matter was difficult, he invited them home. And very similar instance where, you know, instructions were given saying that, okay, this is what they're going to eat. And they took the trouble.
Absolutely. And I was very, very touched by this. And I told him, I said, his name is Raza, Mohammad Raza. So I said, Raza, why do you take trouble? And I could have eaten something. He said, no, sir, you told me you're vegetarian. So I told my wife. I said, but why trouble the poor woman? As it is, she has not seen you for 10 days. We've been on the road. Anyway, so then they traveled with me back to Shiraz. They came. So he told me, sir, can they come with us to Shiraz? I said, fine, no problem. So in Yazd, because it's a very famous and a very old Zoroastrian center, and one of the oldest Zoroastrian fire temples in Iran, we went there. You know? And there is incidentally a fairly large Zoroastrian community even now in Yazd.
Is it?
Despite the, also it's an Islamic country and all that, but the Zoroastrian presence is very strong, particularly in Yazd. And they have an active fire temple there. And this fire, this particular sacred fire, it has been kept going for 2,500 years. It has not gone out.
Wow.
People, one after the other, people have been keeping it, God knows how many thousands of people, who protected that sacred fire. And it traveled. Apparently, it was not in Yazd. It had gone to Azerbaijan. It had gone, to Tabriz and a whole lot of other people. Traveled this fire because the Zoroastrians were persecuted. So they were, the fire had to be taken. I mean, it was like, sacred.
Carried.
It had to be carried. So this fire traveled all over the place. And finally, it's now in Yazd, and it's been going on for 2,500 years. So I went to this. My guide took me there. Fortunately, apparently, the chief priest of that temple was a good friend of my guide. The personal friend. So he told him, he says he's come from India and all that. And he also said he has a lot of Parsi friends in India, which is true. I have Parsi friends. So he was very welcoming, and I was taken inside the sanctum. Normally, non-Zoroastrians are not allowed into the actual fireplace. Where the thing is, So I was given
You're privileged.
Yes, I went there. I did my prolagni,
And is this the same place where where the minarets or something that you had referenced? You were telling me earlier, where it's a mosque, but still the minarets still have the.
No, that is in Samarkand.
Samarkand.
That is in Samarkand. That's in Samarkand.
Want you to share about that?
That is the Shidarya. It's a madrasa. That in fact it's in the Registan Square. You have 3 madrasas. It's actually a square. It's a beautiful thing. It looks like a stage. It's like a stage set. You have the Chilakodi Madrasa, the something else Madrasa, and the Shidar Madrasa, 3 madrasas. And this huge, massive courtyard. It's like a picnic place. Everyone in the evenings, it's a wonderful place. One of the loveliest places in all of Central Asia, in the world, in fact. So the Shidar Madrasa, on the Ivan Gateway, they're called Ivans, the typical arch, The Ivan Gateway, on 2 sides, you have 2 depictions of the sun. You have the sun face, the typical, how you draw the sun with rays and all that. You have 2 depictions, the sun, and with, the stripes of a tiger. That's why they call it Shir. Shir means share. Share Dar. Dar is Dwara, the gate. The Shirdar Madrasa. Now, I asked our guy, because now that is these 2 faces of this, those tigers, whatever, the sun faces, call it whatever you will. That is a heresy in Islam. You cannot depict living things.
Living things.
You cannot
Correct.
depict living things, those 2 things. Those basically their faces. So I asked our guide, both of us, we asked our guide, how do you? He said, sir, this is not Islamic, this is Zoroastrian. It goes back to our Zoroastrian roots. And in Central Asia, because Zoroastrianism spread all over, the Zoroastrian presence is very strong. At least the influences are still visible. Even today, notwithstanding the fact that people are Muslim, practicing Muslims and all that. But they haven't forgotten their Zoroastrian roots, their Zoroastrian underpinnings. They still talk about them. Even Timur, he didn't remove that. He could have.
He could have destroyed it.
Yeah, he didn't do that.
So, a lot of importance to the roots and
and they're very fond of that. In fact, our guide was telling us that even in Uzbek weddings, apparently they use fire.
Just like our Hindu.
Yes. Yeah. So we were part of the weddings, and that's the other thing. What happened was our first trip to Uzbekistan, apparently to the wedding season. So whichever city we went to, Tashkent, Samarkand, Bukhara, Khiva, all those. So there'd be these weddings, these wedding processions. And the wedding procession, one thing is the bride and the groom, they dress like the Western. The groom wears a suit. The bride wears white, all that. And the other thing is they release pigeons or doves or something, whatever. So they keep this procession. And if they find tourists or a foreigner, they grab you. Yeah, you're supposed to be part of that. They invite you for join in the festivities, eat, drink with them,
Wow.
Yeah, in a wedding, apparently having foreigners or tourists or something is a great thing. Yeah, they just grab you.
And for us as travelers, it's amazing to experience that, and
Yes.
then somewhere you find the similarities.
And so we were part of so many wedding processions, They call it, and they won't take no for an answer. I mean, we don't know the language, they don't know our language, we don't know their language.
Yeah.
But fundamentally they're very fond of you.
I mean,
Yeah.
you don't have
You like it.
language is just a barrier.
Yes.
I mean, it's just a
And
means,
it's
right?
beautiful.
End of the day,
It's a lovely experience, this wedding thing.
and I think end of the day, it's also a culture that binds us across
From
the.
it's essentially the Asiatic mind, maybe. Even in Iran, in a place called Bojnur, this is immediately after leaving Mashhad. Mashhad we left on Muharram Day. So I was there. We went to the shrine, Imam Raza shrine, and there again, non-Muslims are not allowed. But my guide said, "You come with me. Don't worry about that." So he took me inside. When we saw the shrine of, one of the holiest shrines in all of Islam, the whole of Islamic world, the shrine of Imam Raza, the eighth Imam in Mashhad, is one of the holy, like our Banaras or wherever, that kind of thing. So I went and saw the mausoleum, the tomb of Imam Raza. Imam Raza died there. Now the Shias believe that he was murdered by no less a person than the famous Caliph whose name figures in the Arabian Nights. Harun al-Rashid. Harun al-Rashid is supposed to have murdered this fellow. Harun al-Rashid was a Sunni. So apparently although actually it was not Harun al-Rashid, it was his son, Maimun. I think Maimun was his son. He apparently poisoned Imam Raza. And Harun al-Rashid is supposed to be buried in the same place, but nobody tells you where the grave is. You see? I asked my guide, so I said, "Where is Harun al-Rashid?" He said, "No, you don't want to go there." They murdered him. They murdered Imam Raza.
One last thing that I want you to share is that your rooms, hotel rooms that you choose, there are stories everywhere that you've gone. You link back to either the authors or.
Yeah, this happened. Only one actually. This was in Bukhara. Bukhara is a good city. These are all names that they're all magical names. We couldn't believe it when we was in Bukhara. We were both my friends were actually in Bukhara. Can you imagine? And these were the reason for the romance of these places, because all these places were closed, either closed by the government. Say the Soviet government would not give you permits for these things, or closed because they were Islamic khanates, emirates. Non-Muslims were not allowed. So they were closed for all these years, hundreds of years. No Muslims were allowed. Non-Muslims were allowed. Hence the attraction, the aura, the fascination of these places. So Bukhara was one such place, And Bukhara has a very prominent Jewish quarter. Bukharan Jews were very famous throughout history. There was a very strong, very large, and a very influential Jewish community in Bukhara. They're called Bukharid Jews, Bukharid Jews. So we were living in this Bukhara, this Jewish quarter. This was the residence, the 17th century residence of a Jewish merchant, preserved perfectly, exactly as it was, and converted into a boutique hotel. It's called the Hotel Amelia. That's Hotel Amelia in Bukhara. So the 17th century Jewish residence. And the entire hotel is built of wood, it's made of wood. You have wooden staircases, wooden balconies, wood, everything, So I couldn't smoke inside.
You can't
come out and smoke. So there, the first time I went there, this was a coincidence, it happened nicely. The room I was given, the name of that room was Sherazade.
The Arabian Nights.
The Arabian Nights. I thought, wow, fantastic. And the room was like that. It was a very pretty room, roughly the size of this room. Beautiful curtains, lovely lamps, typical Arabian Nights atmosphere. All that was missing was the music and the hookah and Sherazade herself. You see? Beautiful. Second time, we went back in 2016 when we did the Aral Sea trip. So we again did Samarkand, Bukhara, all that. So again, Bukhara, went to the same hotel. We were booked in the same hotel, Amelia. So I asked the reception, I said, is Sherazade still available? Is it? He said, yes, sir. So I said, please
give me the same room.
Same room.
No, but see, the thing is, since you've read, you're able to relate and connect these things, right? I mean, if you don't do the reading or if you don't do the research, if you're not able to relate, you will.
That's why our trips were always, history based. They were not touristic things. And Bukhara particularly, we were interested not because of anything else. A very sad incident happened in 1841 in Bukhara. There were two Englishmen who were executed, they were halal in Bukhara by the Emir. The Emir was a chap named Nasrullah. Now, these two Englishmen, they went for whatever, the great game was very much there. The first chap was Colonel Stoddart. Colonel Stoddart, he was first imprisoned, put in a dungeon. Then, he converted to Islam, that didn't help him. Then there was somebody, another chap named Arthur Connolly, who went looking for Stoddart, because he was lost. Went looking for him. He too was put in the dungeon, he too was executed. Incidentally, Connolly was the chap who coined the phrase great game. Okay. So we went to see and they were executed apparently, by this, beheading.
Off with the head.
In the main Registan square in Bukhara. Well, obviously you can't find a memorial or anything there, but obviously somewhere in that
area.
But more important than that, the second trip, what happened? We wanted to see the dungeon. There was a particular dungeon where these two Englishmen were imprisoned, where they, apparently put all his fellows, all the unwanted fellows in that dungeon. It's like a deep well, and the dungeon was filled with snakes, scorpions, rats, centipedes, everything, And these fellows were left to rot there.
Wow.
So we wanted to see this dungeon. We wanted to see whether it still existed. We asked our guide on our second guide. So we asked him, is this thing there? So that time it was a part of a group tour. So he said, all right, special gift for my two Indian friends. And he took us to the fortress in Bukhara, and we saw the dungeon. Now there's a wooden trellis on top, covered up.
But
this is there. This is the thing there.
Wow.
But this guy told us another thing. This talking about this Indian thing, In one of the madrasas, there was this mulberry tree. There was a huge courtyard, and in the center there was this mulberry tree. Incidentally, the whole of Central Asia, particularly mulberry is grown. Oh, silk. Silk root. They're silk. So mulberry trees are all over the place, and there's this particular mulberry tree in the center of this courtyard. So our guide, his name is Behram. So Behram says, all right, question for my Indian friends. Do you recognize this tree? So I said, what are we supposed to recognize it? No, we didn't recognize it. He said, no, you don't, you're supposed to recognize it. We said, well, no, we don't. Apparently, that tree was the tree around which Hema Malini danced to a song in a movie called Alibaba
and the 40 Thieves. Oh.
And this was apparently an Indo-Soviet production way back in the 1980s. It was an Indo-Russian Soviet production with Dharmender and Hema Malini.
Yeah.
And he said Hema Malini danced around this tree. I came back to India. After coming back, I checked on YouTube and sure enough it's there.
It's just there.
That song and the mulberry tree. And we said, my God, she saw Bukhara 20 years, 30 years before we saw.
So, Murthy Garu, it's been a very, very interesting conversation.
Thank you so much.
The stories, the way you describe, the way you visualize, I can almost feel myself sitting there. And I think one of the biggest takeaways for me, to be honest, is to go back to reading so that I learn more about history, and then thereby our travel and experiences become much more richer, isn't it? That is one thing that is core to the whole thing. Second is, there is so much to be discovered in Central Asia.
Oh.
There's so much history, and I know we can go on for another couple of hours talking.
It's a fascinating place. But now the world is now there are tourists now. They come in droves, but they come in droves mainly from the West. But there are Indian travel agents now offering tours to Central Asia.
And for all these people who are planning to travel please do not go as tourists. Go as travelers. Do your research. Read and retrace.
That generation, this present generation will not do that. I mean, at least I don't think they have the time, or to use a phrase which is very current, bandwidth. They don't have, because there are too many things. And for that, you need to belong to a particular generation to have that, because I would not expect, unless it's someone truly exceptional, I would not expect someone to go to Central Asia today or anywhere else for that matter, with the weight of a certain kind of scholarship, with the weight of, earlier reading. If I go to London today, I'll go to it with a literary eye, it's a different kind of eye. I won't go there to, see Madame Tussauds or...
So for all our viewers, through this entire conversation, Murthy Garu has given references to places, books, websites. I will be listing all of them so that it becomes easy for you, to go back and refer, and should you be interested to know more about it. So Murthy Garu, thanks a ton. It's been fabulous having you on our podcast, and can't thank you enough for this.
My pleasure entirely. Thank you.
And that's Mayur signing off. I hope you found this talk today interesting, and do come back and for more stories. This is Mayur Channagere signing off.